26 hours worth of work done in a 24-hour day. And because I've got this kid that's got to go over here, and this kid's got to go over there, and that kid's got to go over there, and then I've got something that's got to be done over here. And, it's just a tangled web that we create. And we forget sometimes, and we just get ourselves in the way because of, we haven't delighted ourselves in the Lord, or we haven't necessarily trusted God in the situation. Verse 5, it says, commit thyself to trust. Again, there's that word. And a lot of these verses, they're kind of repetitive, but at the same time, we've all read the Bible and we've all listened to enough preaching that I don't want to say it in a negative way, but the Bible is repetitive. A lot of these messages and a lot of these verses that we read, it continues to tell us the same thing over and over. Well, probably because we're going to forget it the first 15 times we hear it. And as we hear it again, we're like, oh yeah, just trust God. Trust Him with His plan. And that's the hard part, especially for me. I don't want to, like I said, I want to try to fix things. I want to try to get in the way. And let me tell you, when I fix things, it's fixed right the first time. 32 times later. That's how I fix things. And that's what I tell kids at school all the time. I say, the best teacher in life is doing things the wrong way. And I'm good at that. I may not learn it the first 3 times, so I got to do it a 4th or 5th time. But, and again, it's talking about in verse 5 to commit to truth or trust. And then verse 7, it says, rest. I'm going to have to go back to my Bible here. Get my good handwriting I have. Verse 7, it says, rest in the Lord and wait patiently for Him and fret not. There's fret not again, being repetitive. But just to rest in the Lord. And again, does He need us? No, but He chooses to use us. Do we need Him? Absolutely we do. And we are to trust Him. We are to rest in what God has done for us or what God is going to do for us. And then in verse 8, it's basically cease from anger, to stay away from anger. This psalm, it's encouraging us, the believers, to be confident in the Lord with all of our problems, to confidently trust in the Lord with all of our problems. And I know I've just chose these 8 verses, and in the whole psalm, there is 40 verses, and we've just taken a fraction of the whole chapter. But of that whole chapter, it covers, not to be worried with fretting. It talks about to trust and to do good. It talks about to delight ourselves in the Lord. And again, it comes back to commit to trust. And then we go to rest and be patient with the Lord, because what He's doing, it may not be our timing. And I know we've all heard this and we've all said this. Just a few weeks ago, I was talking to someone, and that's one of the things that they said, in God's timing, it'll work out. I talked to another person today. They were talking about something, and they said, they began to look or search for something, and they said, basically, this, in a nutshell, they said, well, I just, at the beginning of the summer or the spring, whatever, they said, I just put it into God's hands, whatever answer, whatever He wants me to do. And when they said that, I kind of thought, it kind of caught me off guard for them to say that. But at the same time, when they said that, I'm like, you know what? That's the believer's life, because no matter what we want, it's what God wants, and when God wants us to have it. And I'm going to throw myself out there as Mr. Patient, because I am not Him. And I'm not, like I said, I get in the way of things, and not being patient, man. Again, this is a good lesson for y'all, not me. And I say that jokingly, because I am not patient. I don't wait on things and never have, and it's just I'm not geared that way. But this psalm does talk about being confident and trusting in God and His process, and then it also it concludes throughout the verse or throughout the chapter, and it just basically affirming to have faith and trust in the unchanging character of God. Because God in Genesis all the way through Revelations, all the way to where we are today. What God has done, what God is going to do, and we can fill ourselves into any of these, I don't want to say stories, but any of these lives of these people that God has placed in the Bible that we read about, that we study about. Just like tonight, the psalm that we're reading, you can stick your name in every one of those verses, and you can put your name at the front of it, and say, Shane, fret not. Shane, trust. Shane, be patient. Shane, don't be slow to anger. That's just God's way of working through us to where other people can see God working through our life, because ultimately that's how other people see our testimony. We can sit here and we can talk and we can give our testimony every day, but what people see us do is what really matters. And that's the I tell Case and started telling Darby even more. Actions speak louder than words. Just the other day, one of them went up and said sorry to Lauren or something or other, and she looked at him. She said, "Well, it's okay to say sorry, but when we say sorry, we actually mean it, and we go about it what we're saying we're sorry for." Because at the age they are, they think just because they say sorry, they're covered. We're that way too. We're that way with God. God forgive me for what I've done, and then the very next day we turn around and do the same thing. I am that way. But going back to this psalm, it concludes, and I know we didn't read all the 40 verses, but just those 8. I mean, you can see where it's talking about to just be confident, to be secure in having faith and trusting in God's unchanging character. One thing, and God is definitely our provider, and He's our protector. Going back to Psalm 23, He puts us in situations that we need to be in, and we put ourselves in situations we don't need to be in, and who do we go to get us out? When we get in a situation where it's done got way above our head, what do we start doing then? Then we start praying instead of praying from the get-go. And again, I'm guilty of that. And something that I thought was very eye-opening, in the Bible, Christians, I don't want to say every Christian, because there's some Christians that we read about, that we study about. They did miraculous things. What Job went through was a miraculous thing. Samson, what he did, even the story of David and Goliath, and the Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego. All those stories that we grow up hearing about and we study about them now. Those are great acts. But throughout the Bible, you hardly ever hear the Bible reference Christians or reference us as like a roaring lion, or the Bible always refers to us as weak. We're always referred to as sheep, especially Psalm 23. We're referred to as the sheep. And sheep have to have a shepherd. They have to have a protector. They have to have a provider to get them from point A to point B, because they don't have the ability to do that on their own. And too many times we forget that, because too many times we think we're the David that defeated Goliath, or we're the Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego that went through the fire. We kind of put ourselves on a pedestal a little bit more, instead of looking at it and looking at the situation and saying, you know what, I'm just a dumb sheep. I'm not smart enough. I can't do it on my own. I have to have my protector. I have to have my provider. I have to have my shepherd, which is God. And so, I thought going into, just kind of scrolling through, was going to Psalm 23, and this hit me, and it was like, hey, it's a direct correlation. So I stopped on Psalm 37, and just to kind of reiterate or kind of put it back into perspective for me, to not to worry, to trust in God, to trust in His plan, to be patient, and not to be angry at people, and or to how they treat me or my family, that kind of thing. And I'm like I said, I'm pretty forgetful on a lot of that stuff. So I thought tonight was a really good reminder, those 8 verses, and just the relation between that and Psalm 23 that I had the ability to teach a couple Sundays ago to our Sunday school class. Anybody got anything that you want to add or take away from? Questions, comments, testimonies? Anybody thought of another prayer request? Mm-hmm. Yeah, they still haven't located all the bodies, right? Is that the latest?
That river ain't that big. When it got out of where it went, it got big.
Yeah.
The Guadalupe River, not that big a river.
Right. It's it's eye opening. I mean, just and that's what that's one thing that I know. Me and Lauren, we were talking to the kids the other day. We went floating down the creek, and we were talking to Kason because really and truly, Kason is not afraid of the water. And we told him, we said, look, creek, you can't really see what's on bottom. I said, so you don't need to be just running and jumping off. We were floating down through there, and about, I don't know, 6, 8 inches below the water, there was a stump, and you couldn't see it till you got right there, and he was beside me. I said, hey, look right there, you see that? He said, yeah. I said, that's why we told you, you can't see it on the surface, till you get right on top of it. And that's what I was telling him. I said, you don't, and I told him, I said, that's mine and your mama's job is to teach you some of these things about dangers. And I mean, from what I understand, I haven't just sat down and listened to the whole Texas flooding. I know it was I don't want to say I don't want to misspeak here, but I don't want to say accident, but just a freak thing that took place. But I mean, that's something that I don't want to say is preventable, because I really don't think something like that would be preventable. Any others? All right. Martin, you mind to dismiss us?